The New Orleans Saints lose a heartbreaker. LSU Sleepwalks to a win against Louisiana Tech. We got all that and more coming up here on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. All right, welcome back to another edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Appreciate you listening in. And if you haven't already, make sure you go ahead and follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast platform that you use, and also subscribe to us on YouTube. We got some great exclusive content on there. Just search Louisiana Lunch Hour. It is just that simple. And we'll start off the show going over some of the weekend winners, because honestly, who wants to talk about losers out the gate? We can talk about a little bit of positivity, and then we get to the negativity, especially when it comes to those New Orleans Saints. That said, we do need to talk about LSU. They got a very nice win over We do need to talk about LSU. They got a win, but it was very sluggish against Louisiana Tech by the score of 23-7. And I find it funny in a way, because going into the weekend on Friday's pod, I think I talked about this on Thursday as well, is I was seeing a 35-point spread. I immediately said, listen, this is a game that I think La Tech could pull a backdoor cover and LSU wins by at least 4 touchdowns. Was not the case. 23-7 was the final, and it was pretty much a neutered offense, and LSU didn't do much and still sleptwalked their way into a 3-possession win. It's, I'm kind of going back to the Dabo Swinney comment from last week, and I'll reference it here. This was a lot like you taking a test and you didn't prepare all that much for it, but you still passed. You got like a C+. It's a win, but it still doesn't necessarily look all that great for you in the long run. The fact they stayed in the same spot in the top 25 polls that dropped yesterday really surprised me, since you'd expect them to drop at least a couple spots even with the win, because you should have won going away. Strangely, the Tigers looked like they were getting better at the run against Clemson, but they let their foot off the gas. Caden Durham, who was one of the better offensive players in the run game, only had 13 carries, only got 29 yards out of those efforts. And then the leading rusher, Harlem Berry, he had like 66 yards, something like that. 43-yard run late made up the majority of those. So one run pretty much consisted of like over 2/3 of his total yardage on the evening. That's not a great look. Nussmeier, fairly pedestrian in this game. And if he wants to live up to some of the hype that many of the Tiger faithful have put on him, I was hearing people before the season even started calling him, Nussmeier for Heisman, starting that campaign very early on. He'll need to do more in the weeks ahead. Defense did just enough. I think the big highlight there was Wes Weeks had himself a day, 10 total tackles. But outside of that, nothing really jumped off the page to me as like, oh, this is a game changer. Then outside of that, you had 2 fairly significant injuries in the win against Florida. The one that really could hurt is losing center Braylon Moore for a significant period of time. Because you have to remember, this is a program it's trying to get its run game together, but also protect the quarterback. And a center is absolutely crucial to keep that offensive line together. I've seen it happen a million times. When you lose your center, that offense starts to stagnate. Look at last year when the Saints lost their center. That team fell apart quick, fast, and in a hurry. Mind you, the game was against the eventual Super Bowl champs. So it at least made sense to lose that game. But the second you lost that center for a significant period of time, you were throwing people in there, you lost that consistency and that continuity. And that's huge for a offense that's still trying to figure itself out, because LSU doesn't have a preseason like the NFL does. As of now, no word how long he'll be out for. We'll hear more hopefully later today when Brian Kelly spends his time with the media. And also, he's going to miss at least the game against Florida. But beyond that, we don't know. Another one is Trey'Daz Green. The tight end did get injured in the contest. But according to everything we're hearing, more likely than not, he is going to be able to play in the next few weeks. He's probably going to miss no more than 2 or 3 weeks, according to CBS Sports' Matt Zenitz and Chris Hummer. He apparently sustained a right knee injury in the fourth quarter of the victory, making a block for Caleb Johnson. And he'd been targeted. He hadn't recorded anything in that game, but he was definitely useful when it comes to the run game. Again, losing that run blocking is going to affect you a lot. And hopefully, they can kind of get this right. And hopefully we can hear more and get more true updates later today when Brian Kelly does spend time with the media. Again, this podcast drops right around noon. We tape it the night before, so we don't necessarily get to talk about the breaking news that pops up in these pressers. But on the Tuesdays, we try and get to a lot of that. Meanwhile, the Cajuns, they looked good in the win and showed a spark. And I'm starting to become a Beal-liever. We're talking about Daniel Beal. He looked good. Wasn't necessarily a star-making performance. If Walker Howard were out there, I think we could be having a different conversation. But I'm hopeful that we can see Daniel Beal continue to evolve in his role before this season's all said and done. This team came out the gates really strong. Great kickoff return. Gave them a short field and got a quick 6. Then McNeese got the ball. And this is probably one of the biggest knocks I had on the defense on the evening was the secondary got torched. First pass from Jake Strong. The man had a wide open receiver, busted coverage, and they got plenty of yak on that play. And I'm sure many Cajuns fans in attendance were wanting to yak after seeing that one. That said, things kind of worked itself out. Things were kind of handled themselves and played out the right way if you're a Cajuns fan. They started to kind of hold their own and also had some very fortunate calls. Just from where I was seeing at my vantage point, there were at least 2, if not 3, very fortunate ball spots. Again, from my perspective, I'm not down on the field. I'm up near the stands. So it's like I don't necessarily get to see every single vantage point, and I'm not on the chain crew. But I feel like they got a couple of very, very fortunate spots. That's just my opinion. Then you have Bill Davis. He looked great in the contest, set a career high in rushing yards. Also got a couple touchdowns in there as well. Very good performance. I think they have a really good 1-2 punch with him and Zylan Perry. I think they have, I wouldn't say it's a boom and zoom like what we saw with Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara early on in Kamara's career, but it's close because I think Zylan Perry's got much more of that kind of fast twitch. He's got that speed, but also can kind of dart around. I liked what I saw from him. But Bill is much more of that, 2 yards and a cloud of dust type runner. If he has a hole, he's going to find it. But more often than not, if you're wanting a guy that's going to be probably very efficient in a wheel route, I think Zylan Perry is your guy. Even though we didn't see a whole lot of him in the second half, kind of speculated whether or not he could be injured. But I feel like they also want to see what other guys can do, especially in a game where you're playing an FCS program like McNeese. Not a knock against them, because, they kept it fairly competitive. I'll say shout out to Steven Blanco. Man was on a mission in the final 2 minutes of the ball game. He had a play where they could have just ran the ball a couple times, gotten first down, take a knee, go home. He decided, nah, bro, I'm just going to go ahead and do me and just stiff arm the guy safety and just take it into the end zone. I was like, oh my God. At first I thought he trucked him, and I'm like, bro, you just trucked this guy. You're already up. You're already winning this ball game, and you go ahead and do that. Shout out to you, bro. That was impressive and kind of funny when it comes right down to it. Defense overall, after the first couple drives, they looked good, brought the pressure. And I also have to say, they executed. We talk about 2-minute offense a lot. I think the 2-minute defense that we saw needs to be studied by a lot of teams, because you had the first play after the 2-minute timeout. You had a interception, a really nice one too. Then you score a touchdown off of that. I think it was probably a minute 30 left on the clock. And, McNeese had plenty of opportunity to score a touchdown to try and, obviously take back control of the game and place and make it take it. That did not happen. It was a 3 and out. And after every play, Dez is calling timeouts. And then the Cajuns, they get the spot, they get the opportunity, and more importantly, they get points on the board going into half before McNeese gets the ball to start things off. That was executed perfectly. That was something I was like, cool, let's go. It was really nice to see that kind of play. The only real negative I had from this game is on the offensive side, and it's Shelton Sampson. The stone hands this man has right now is like concerning. And this goes back to last week too. But I think it was a lot more noticeable because Beal was relying on him a lot. And there were at least 2 or 3 catches where three or 2 balls thrown to him that should have been catchable by an average wide receiver, but he couldn't quite bring it in for whatever reason. It's mind-boggling to me. Meanwhile, you have Tulane. They had to rally to take control of the ball game and then hold on for dear life against South Alabama. After beating Northwestern in big fashion, they were up against the ropes early on with South Alabama finding the end zone twice in the first quarter with a nice first drive. Bishop Davenport ran it in for the score. Then he connects with Devin Voisin. I had to kind of think about how to say his name real quick, but it was an impressive play. 65-yard touchdown, a lot of yak on it, but he turned his body around. Defender left too much of a gap on him, wasn't necessarily paying super great attention. And the man was off to the races. He did not get touched, but Tulane, they wasted a little time wrapping things up, tying things up, I should say, before the first quarter was over. Retzloff connected with Pascuzzi for a touchdown. Then Zuberi Mobley ran it in for the score from 16 yards out. Not a half bad run either. I liked what I saw from him. Then the Jags tried to be bold going for it on the Tulane 43-yard line in the second quarter, which I still don't. I feel like if you're going for it in the second quarter, and I understand analytics and all that stuff, but I still feel like you are making a huge mistake if you are a team doing that, especially that close to midfield. It's a short field to work with, and that's going to turn into points for the other team if you fail, and they did. And that wound up leading to Retzloff running into the end zone on a 1-yard run, untouched. Then Tulane held serve for the rest of the game, increased their lead with a couple field goals, including a 50-yarder from Patrick Durkin, which really shows how much this game has changed. Because I remember not too long ago, it felt like college kickers weren't nailing the easy field goals, but now they're starting to nail these 50-yarders. Even the NFL, we're seeing the 60-yard mark getting hit consistently, and not just in Denver. We're seeing these at sea level, and it's something short of impressive to see the college game and the kickers getting even better, because it feels like it wasn't long ago whenever the 50, 55 yards were considered elite kickers. Then South Alabama had a chance to rally in the fourth quarter, had a really entertaining final drive with a pass on 2nd and 7 ruled incomplete. He caught one. He was on his behind, but he looked like he was out of bounds. Call got upheld as incomplete. And then they had one more chance to kind of get things done after roughing the passer on 4th down. That turned into a 6 after a really nice pass to Voisin. Just again, really quick and easy touchdown for him. 2-point attempt was no good. Javion White picked it off. Nothing. That was an impressive pick at that. And that sealed the deal after the onside kick was recovered by Tulane. So 2-0 on the year. It's a great thing to see. They got quite a few votes in the AP Top 25, but there's a lot of teams in there that are probably going to get over before they do, especially after what we just saw. We'll wrap things up in the winning column with Southeastern got a nice win over Murray State, 45-22, 45-24. By all accounts, this was a fun game in the first half. Both teams fought hard, kept it competitive, but the Lions really kind of took over the ball game in the second quarter. 21 answered before both teams headed to the locker room. and there was no turning back. The Racers got outpaced in this one. Really nice victory for the Lions to get back to 500. All right, when we come back, we need to talk about what's going on with the New Orleans Saints. It feels like every time you have hope, they rip your heart out. Talk about that next here on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. All right, let's get into the conversation about the New Orleans Saints and their kind of overall not great performance in the game against the Arizona Cardinals. And it feels like clockwork to me. You start the game out looking good, give you hope in the final moments, and then your heart gets ripped out and all that hope is gone. It seems like it's the life of a Saints fan. I love the way the defense looked at the gate. They brought the pressure early on and got a few nice sacks on Kyler Murray. Cam Jordan, like right out the gate, showed that this man does not age, nothing short of impressive. And, he asked for these gold jerseys for years. I think it's time to stop listening to players in these situations. Again, it's cute seeing the gold end zone, the gold jerseys, all that stuff. But if that's the performances we get in the gold jerseys, I think we need to leave those in the archives, please. The offense walked onto the field. It was pretty much, a comedy of errors. How many procedural penalties they had. That's probably the biggest takeaway I have from this loss is you were death by 1,000 cuts. 13 total penalties. And you had a few that wanted being declined. But you cannot win football games after having 13 penalties. And a lot of those were false starts, illegal formations, illegal shifts. You can't be doing that if you're a professional team. And that goes on Kellen Moore. And we'll talk about him a little bit later. Now, Spencer Rattler, he looked okay. Kendre Miller balled out, and I'm glad to see that since it felt like they were just giving a big middle finger to Dennis Allen because he never let him live up to the potential. Then you have Chris Olave. I'm convinced at this point that he is going to retire after the season because he's got too many injuries. The way they keep throwing these damn hospital balls at him. It goes back to Derek Carr. But it's insane to see how many times this man has to go into the medical tent since joining the roster, being drafted out of the Ohio State. I'm surprised Brandon Cooks isn't getting these hospital balls. Hell, I'm surprised Brandon Cooks is on the team in 2025, but here we are. It was a lot of just bad mistakes, and there were moments where you looked great. You look like you could beat anybody. But of course, I think it all comes down to some learning curves and some growing pains, especially with Kellen Moore. Was his first regular season game. A lot of hype around this. He has to learn a lot of things, namely that you have to spend timeouts in certain situations. Not using your timeouts to finish the half, that was a head scratcher. And if this wasn't his first year as a head coach, I'd definitely be like, you're on the hot seat just for that, bud. But thankfully, it's your first year, so we're willing to give you a little bit of grace, to say the least. That said, the final drive is going to be put alongside probably hundreds of other losses in the history of this franchise. You knew this team was cooked whenever they couldn't get that catch to Olave, and it was caught and then overturned. I don't care what they say, that thing was caught. Like, if you can show me in any way that it wasn't a catch, all right. But I feel like every angle I saw of that was a catch. I'll never understand that sometimes, how the NFL keeps not understanding what a catch is. That's the most basic play of the game, and we continue to get it wrong in 2025. What are we doing? And then you had like a couple boneheaded decisions in that final drive, namely opting to spike it when you did. You had that defensive line gassed. Why not utilize that fully, get to the line quicker? And I feel like that's something this team needs to work on, is getting the no huddle rolling the right way to wear the other team down, because they could have probably gotten a win if they didn't spike it when they did the first time. The last time they spiked it, it needed to be done. But you've got to at least utilize things the right way. If you're going to set up for a spike, I'd say go for a fake spike on that. And if you got to throw it and stop the clock, that's fine. But you had that team gas on the front seven. Calais Campbell, he did not look like he was 100% going to finish this game out. But, man, it was that moment. And then Jawan Johnson, he had a chance to be the hero. He got like 12 feet in the air, it felt like, to get a potential game-winning touchdown. Of course, Budda Baker was right there and just ripped the ball out of his hands just before he hit the ground. Just an overall frustrating loss, but at the same time, there's a weird positive feeling that I had coming out of the game. And I understand the point of view of Saints fans wanting to tank, but I'm not a believer in tanking when it comes to this team. Because that's not the Saints' MO. They don't tank, at least intentionally. You cut down on these self-inflicted wounds they had in this game. I genuinely believe this Saints team has a shot to win more games than many of the experts think. I feel like everybody kind of has this team pegged as a 3-4 win team, and that's as good as they're going to get. Honestly, based off this performance, I think they can do better. Not saying 11-6, but they could be more towards 500 if the ball bounces in their favor more often than not. Now, I'm sure Saints fans don't want to hear that. They want to just tank to get number one, to go get Arch Manning or Lenore Sellers or Garrett Nussmeier, whoever the flavor of the week is. I just don't think you can bet on that. Because go look at a lot of those guys that have been the top draft picks that they have landed the last few years. Not necessarily all of them are hitting on all cylinders. Some of them are failing, not because of their efforts and their talents, but because of the front office being absolute boneheads and the head coaching staff not understanding how to protect the quarterback. Looking at you, Cincy, but I digress. I know tanking is what you want to see, but if they can play like this through 17 games in a season, I can't see them tanking for the number one pick. I can't. There's no basis of this team doing that in the history of this franchise, or at least in the last 20 years I've watched this team, minus the Katrina year, which was just such a very different situation than anybody's ever dealt with in the history of the league. That's just how I see this Saints team. I feel like they could tank if things go completely awry and we start seeing, Tyler Shuh be thrown out there. And it feels like that could happen sooner than later, because I wonder if Kellen Moore doesn't have a lot of faith in what the man can do. Just feels like it to me. That said, I need to get to some stuff around the state because we are running short on time. And that is some other scores around the state with your college football teams. Northwestern State, they lost to Minnesota. No surprise there, 66-0. The real surprise, though, was that this was a surrender. Yeah, they waved the white flag late in the ball game because there was some bad weather. There was a delay, and then Northwestern State, Minnesota met, and let's just go home, get these people safe, and then we'll head out after things kind of clear up. Nothing but respect for doing that. But it was just kind of like, oh, I didn't realize that was an option when it comes to these games that are absolute butt weapons. Again, you're taking the check and getting out of there, right? Meanwhile, Grambling, they may have won the battle of the bands by all accounts. They lost big on the gridiron, 70-0, playing the best team in the land. Again, not much to really say about when it comes to that game. UL Monroe, they got stomped out by Alabama. And it's one of those where it was out of hand right like before the first quarter was over. I think it was 28-0. If this were high school football in Louisiana, there'd be a running clock. And when the only highlight of the game for the Warhawks is the punter. You know it's a game where you cash a check and move on to next week. I mean, that punter had a Sports Center highlight that I'm sure, you know, the WWE, AEW, or any other wrestling promotion saw this dude throwing a Stan Hansen lariat. It was like, dude, let's get this guy signed now. Like, this guy. It's still one of the coolest plays I saw all weekend. Instead of just tackling the guy, I mean, yeah, all the Alabama punt returner had to do was beat the punter. The punter said, nah, and just ran back, hit him with a lariat. Again, I was hearing them say it was a Bradshaw type clothesline. Again, I get it. That's the mainstream stuff. But to me, a true wrestling fan saw that. I was like, that was Stan Hansen just rearing back and hitting you with a lariat as hard as he can. Then Southern, in disappointing fashion, I think the heat is going to start coming on Mickey Joseph before too long. If you're losing games 30-7 to Alabama State, I just don't necessarily see him sticking around that long if you have these kind of issues popping up frequently. I'm hoping that's not the case and he can kind of right the ship, but it's not a good start for the Jags. You're sitting at 1-2 after some really tough losses and some tough conversations that need to be had. Meanwhile, the Colonels of Nichols, they lost to West Georgia. And this one I wanted to give at least a little more grace because this is first year with a new head coach after all the years of Tim Rebowe at the helm. There's going to be some growing pains. I feel like that was something that I said before the season started. And he tried to get the team back in the win column. He's looking at 1-2 to start the year. I get it. But this was just not the game for Nichols to get that done. I don't know why. I was surprised to see that end result late Saturday night when I got back home after the Cajuns game that didn't end until damn near 11 o'clock. But here we are. And hopefully you've been enjoying the podcast, the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast, that is. Appreciate you listening in. And also, I'd appreciate if you took the time out of your day to go ahead and check us out on social media. We got some cool content going up there, as well as on our YouTube channel at Louisiana Lunch Hour, all across the social media platforms, especially on YouTube. We got some really cool exclusive content that's dropping over there as well. So until tomorrow, we'll talk to you down the road. And you've been enjoying and listening to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast.